Good evening. Today is Tuesday, January 29, 2019. This is the opening of the Board of Selectmen meeting. This meeting is being televised by Whitman Hanson Cable Access. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take it away, Matt.
All right. Good evening, Hanson. Here are this week's announcements. Open burning season began January 15th and will run until April 30th. Permits are available at fire headquarters, 505 Liberty Street, daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The cost of a permit is $20, payable by check or money order to the town of Hanson. No cash will be accepted. Nomination papers for the May 18th town election are now available at Town Hall's clerk's office. For more information, contact the town clerk at 781-293-2772. The town clerk urges all voters and residents who have not returned their 2019 census form to do so as soon as possible. Any voters who do not return their census form will be placed on the inactive voter list for future elections. The town clerk's office will be closed on Thursday, February 7th to attend a town clerk's conference. Please plan your business accordingly. The Hanson Public Library has teamed up with the Boston Bruins to participate in their annual pajama drive to benefit the DCF kids and Cradles to Crayons. The Boston Bruins PJ drive will run from February 1st to March 15th, 2019. The library will be collecting new pairs of pajamas for babies, children, and teens. The Hanson Key Club will be holding their first annual prom fair at the Whitman Hanson High School Library on Tuesday, February 26, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. There will be a dress swap. Prom tickets will be available for purchase. Local vendors will be on hand. All proceeds will be to support the American Cancer Society. For information, contact the event chair, Alicia Edkin, by phone at 781-618-8749 or by email at edkin.alicia, ALICIA, @whrsd.org. On March 16th, the Hanson Business Network will be hosting its third annual St. Patrick's fundraiser to benefit the Hanson Food Pantry from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. at Needles Lodge at Camp Kewanee. This event will be a St. Patrick's-themed shindig, complete with dinner, live Irish music, DJ'd Irish music, an Irish step dancing performance, cash bar, and a silent auction, as well as a photo booth. Tickets are a bargain at $25 a person and may be purchased online at Eventbrite or by emailing Laura Kemet at lfitzpatrick or lfitzkemet@gmail.com or by calling 781-294-1261. Discounts are available for folks who have purchased 8 or more tickets. Please visit the Hanson Business Network Facebook page for more information. If you cannot attend but wish to donate an item for a silent auction or raffle, it would be greatly appreciated. Volunteers are needed on the following committees: the 200th anniversary, Capital Improvement, Cultural Council, Economic Development, Elder Affairs, Finance, Historical Commission, Memorial Day Patriot Observance, and Zoning Board Alternate. Applications for appointment and information on the committees are available at the town website at hanson-ma.gov. Vacancies are on the following boards: Board of Health, Board of Library Trustees, and 1 member of the Hanson Housing Authority. Applications for appointment and information on the committees are available at the town website. And for everyone that's in the audience tonight, there are extra documents up here if you want to follow along. So feel free to come grab one if you need it. And then we also have some upcoming meetings. The 200th anniversary will be this Thursday, January 31st at 7 p.m. School committee will be on Wednesday, February 6th at 7 p.m. And it's going to be a budget meeting. And then the Selectmen's meeting will be on February 12th and 26th, both at 7 p.m.
So glad you did the announcements, right? Polar plunge, Melissa. Excellent job. That was awesome. I know I wasn't here, but I saw all the pictures and everything, and looked like I missed a good time. So keep it up. Okay, Todd. I think I saw Todd walk in. Good evening. Todd is our accountant, and Todd is going to give us an update. Take it away, Todd.
Thank you. I'm not sure which order you have it in your packet. I would like to go through the quarterly update first, if that's okay. I'm not sure if that's first.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have two packets for you tonight. So this is giving the board a snapshot of where we are at through the second quarter of this fiscal year. And last time I was with you, we spent a bit more detail than I'm going to tonight. I'm going to focus more tonight on development of next year's budget. But you have a 4-page document which outlines, the first page, the results of operations for the general fund through 6 months and the same period a year ago, followed by the water department and then the recreation and the solid waste programs. With respect to the general fund, there's not a lot that I need to that I think the board needs to be concerned about at this point. I will let you know that we do have a few budgets that may need transfers or some correction before year end, most of which the Finance Committee is already aware of. With respect to general government, we are going to be a little short in information technology. If you recall, we did hire a tech director in November, I think he started. And at town meeting in October, we transferred some funds from expenses to salary so that we had the proper account to pay him from. But in doing so, we really shortchanged some of the service side. So we'll need to do a bit of a correction, which we should be able to handle as a transfer in May. We also had clarification from town council that we had budgeted Hanson's share. It's a shared position with East Bridgewater. But because of the mechanics of it, we need to, in the future, budget the full salary and recognize the reimbursement from East Bridgewater as like a revenue. So we'll be presenting it. It'll look like a big increase, but we will have a corresponding revenue increase to offset that East Bridgewater's share of both the salary and related benefits. Also in the general government section, we may run a little short in the Conservation Commission area. We're, I think, close to having an agent on board. And it's at a higher rate than the stipend we had budgeted for this year. So we may need a little bit to get through the balance of the year. The utilities budget, as you know, we've taken custody of the McQuon School. That has resulted in some additional utility bills, gas, electric. And now that the building's largely shut down, those should moderate. But you'll see a modest increase in next year's budget, and it's related to taking on the McQuon School. The public safety area right now, the police department has had some building repair issues, particularly with their HVAC. The Finance Committee is aware of this. We've just been trying to manage with his overall expense budget to see what he really may need toward year end. Public Works, the Highway Department overtime account will need some additional funds. They've developed a nice one-page outline of all the different reasons and that they've needed to have overtime this year, some of which were one-time. Snow and ice is fine right now. We'll see how the rest of the winter goes. We typically do need to supplement that. The town appropriates $300,000 for snow and ice removal through the budget, and then we typically supplement it the following spring based on how the winter went. And lastly, the only other concern would be the library has some issues with their HVAC system, which you may have heard about, recent issues a couple weekends ago. That may result in some large repair costs, and I think it's being investigated as to whether it's just a minor repair now and a capital item for next year, or whether it needs to be addressed sooner. In our general insurance, we've also taken on the McQuon School to our building insurance program. But we do have adequate funds to cover that this year. The water fund which is the second page of your handout, is tracking fine. Nothing to be concerned about at this point. Revenues look slightly off, but overall, I don't really have any concerns in this area at this time. The recreation fund, as I mentioned the last time I was with the board, I'm concerned about the revenues not keeping pace with the budgeted expenses and operating costs. So you'll notice at this point in the year, a year ago, they were at 66% of revenue. Keeping in mind their program is somewhat seasonal and it's not 1/12 each month type of operation. We have through the summer is a large part of their operation. To date, the same period, we're at just under 50%. So we're about 16% off the pace through the first half of the year. We've looked at commitments and projected revenue for the balance of this year and do have some concerns that they'll come up short on the revenue side. We've advised them and they are going to take a look at moderating their expenses to sort of mitigate some of the potential revenue shortfall. But this is something we'll keep a close eye on as we go through the year, and it may require some town meeting action in May.
So, salaries is up 13% from last year, but revenue is down 16% from last year?
That's right. Well, it's the first year with a full rec director. So that's part of the increase, and I know they added, I think, a part-time maintenance.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have any more questions?
Solid waste program just is tracking okay. So we're good, thank you.
That'll be coming up in the future.
Yes, but it's good for a couple of years and then, yeah, it's a new game, right. Any other questions about current? Sorry it's quick, but I know
Anybody else have any questions?
Sure.
Sure.
Todd, why, we budget as a town $300,000, and I know this winter has been pretty easy for the highway department on the ice and snow.
Yeah, we're only at about 85,000 today.
Okay, but over the past 3 years of actuals, it's been 420, 459, and 523,000.
Yes, sir.
But the 300,000, that was budgeted over the past 3 years,
Correct.
and we still go over that
Yes,
by at least
at
160.
least, or if not 200.
100.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Why wouldn't we want to budget more for ice and snow?
Well, the winter varies quite a bit, so we certainly don't want to budget on the high side and have those funds tied up where they could, support some other town service. It's one of the few areas where we're allowed by state law to overexpend or go into a deficit position. We're not allowed to do that with the police budget, for example, or any of the other operating budgets. And we have tried in recent years to sort of start to ramp it up a little bit. We'd like to get to sort of the average of the last 5 years' spending. So, but to your point, we're probably 150,000 off the pace there.
Okay, and where we're able to spend more,
Yep.
how much more are we allowed to spend before we actually get in trouble?
Well, we'll look at our plan. What we would try to do in May is use some of our certified free cash, the town's equity, to plug any shortfall. If there's not enough to do that, then any remaining deficit would carry into the next year and be added to the taxes, be added to property taxes.
Okay.
Which we try not to do. We try to, get it sorted out. But In 2015, when we had a lot of snow, we weren't able to fully do that. But the last couple of years, we have been able to come out of the year with no deficit in snow.
Thanks.
Any
Sure.
more questions? I remember that line used to be about 150,000.
I was gonna say 150 or 60, yeah, you're right, and we've tried to start to get it creeped
Hold it
up,
up.
but,
Well, my fear had always been that if you lowball it for too long, the state, I think, would come back and say that, as you've pointed out, Jim, that you're not adequately funding it and that you're almost anticipating running into a deficit every year.
Right.
So, and as Todd has noted, and I think the chairman noted, slowly we've been trying to ratchet that up, but again, balancing it against, all these other competing things. And again, it's the type of thing that we have the flexibility with as opposed to any other budget, so, we leave it there on,
Okay, I guess then, Todd, I would ask
Sure.
you, because it's not down here, the actual for 2015, and you probably don't know that.
yeah, I have a nice 10-year history for you, which I'll provide.
Because that'd be great,
Yes.
because you did say that you averaged the last 5 years.
Yep.
And if 15 was worse than 16, 17, and 18, the
Right.
300,000 is not the average of at least the last 4 years.
Yep, right, no, you're absolutely right. And I do have an exhibit that I will get to the board.
Can't wait to
I'll
see
prepare-
it.
I just have to hit print, so
All right, thanks.
I'll send it to you.
15 might throw off your numbers. That was the year we got all that snow.
It was, that's right, it was an unusual.
But if 19 is great,
Even if you could go 13, 14, 15, and even if 15 was an outlier, then
and
Right.
19 could be an outlier,
Yeah, let's
the
hope.
average of the middle three, it's,
Are you working for the highway department?
no.
Oh, all right.
Working for the people of Hanson, and I want to make sure that property taxes don't go up because we low budgeted right here.
Actually, it's a great question.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, well, when I'm back before you for the third quarter, I'll have current updates, but I'll also, in the meantime, get you the exhibit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so next we have the budget.
Okay, so you have about a 5-page document in your packets. I'm going to focus primarily on the first page, the cover, which is sort of the high-level sources and uses document, and it's followed by 3 or 4 pages that are presented much like we see at town meeting when we do the omnibus budget.
Todd, can I just say, if there are some copies out on the table up front, if you want to get them, if you want to follow along.
So this is really the sort of kickoff to the public portion of working the budget. As you know, the town bylaw requires the town administrator to deliver a budget to the selectmen by the 31st of January, so we're pleased to be on time. We do have some work still to do on the budget to close a few gaps, but I'll give you an overview of where we're at to date. So the top 2/3 of the exhibit really talk more to the sources of funds, or the top half, I should say. So as you know, most of our budget is supported through property taxes, local receipts, and state aid. So with respect to property taxes, we're allowed under state law to raise the next year's levy limit by no more than 2.5% by state law. To that, we're allowed to also capture any new construction or what's referred to as new growth. So it could be an addition to an existing home, it could be a new home, it could be major improvements to a business. And that's, as I think I may have mentioned to the board last time I was here, that's something that does fluctuate year to year. And usually the lead indicator for us is building permit revenue. So if someone takes out a permit this year, in another year, perhaps we're able to start capturing some or all of that new tax revenue. It's reviewed and certified by the Department of Revenue, and that increases our allowable tax levy for the following year. We also have a few voter-approved debt exclusions. One is for the police station, so that the voters agreed to pay extra taxes for the annual principal and interest on the debt service required for constructing the new police station. Not so new anymore. We also have a couple of other initiatives, just over $300,000 for the regional high school construction, our share. And also, we have about $136,000, which relates to a 5-year plan for upgrading school technology, where when this was originally approved, Whitman was in a position where they just paid cash for their share. We weren't in a position to do that at the time, so we've been paying this off over 5 years. I think the year after next is the last year. Fiscal 2021 is the final payment. And then that will drop off. That's perhaps the nice thing about debt exclusions is when you pay the debt off, the tax levy does not stay at that level. It drops back down. So, unlike an override. So we're looking at about almost $7 million of property tax revenue available to fund operating budgets for 2020. The new growth number will develop. We're able to capture construction through June 30th, so this isn't always a tricky one in January to project. I'm using $225,000 at this time. The initial number I got from the assessing office was actually $200,000. So we'll keep a close eye on this, and hopefully it will creep up and help us, fund some of the shortfall that we have. But there definitely has been a bit of a decline in permit revenue that we've seen, and it's sort of bearing out in the initial estimates of new value for new construction. The state aid, commonly referred to as the cherry sheet here in Massachusetts. The governor's budget was released the middle of last week, so we have put in this document numbers based on the governor's budget proposal. As you know, that goes through quite a long process with the legislature and doesn't really get settled out until July, a couple of months after our town meeting, after we approve budgets. And in some cases, it increases a bit. But what we're presenting to you tonight is we're using the governor's budget for estimated state revenue, estimated state assessments and charges as well, which is a little further down the page. Local receipts, this includes, the major one here in Hanson is motor vehicle excise tax. That's considered a local receipt. It would include any of our permit revenues, licenses, departmental fees, investment earnings that are not restricted for any reason. And that also is where we're now adding in East Bridgewater's share of funding the IT director. So that's why you see a little more of a increase than we might normally expect in that line. So again, taxes, local taxes, state aid, and local receipts yield about $25.25 million available to fund budgets and other purposes. Then we have other sources of funds in the next group that very often are one-time or sources that may vary year to year. So we like to apply some of these to one-time items like our capital plan, and others are recurring, which we apply to offsetting the impact on the cost of the budget. So just quickly, at this point, we're proposing to use $944,000 of free cash to support the capital plan for next year, which includes over $600,000 for the regional schools and local schools capital. I think IT fiber for $145,000. Overhead doors at the fire station for $62,000. And I think we have got maybe the library HVAC, and there may be also an issue at Camp Kawani that we need to address. So we've targeted about $870,000 of that to be used in some fashion to fund. That doesn't fund all of the capital, but that funds quite a few of the capital requests for next year. And also, we're proposing the board consider adding $50,000 to our stabilization fund and $25,000 to the school stabilization fund from free cash. And again, what we try to do with the general stabilization fund is keep that level at a minimum of 5% of our operating budget, which is what the credit rating agencies like to see when they're looking at it.
Todd, what is the potential issue up at Camp Kawani?
Mike may be able to speak to it better, but it has to do with replacing the stove.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Large.
that's
Yeah.
exactly
It's
what
a
it
fairly
is.
involved
Gas and all
project.
that.
Yeah, and we're to the point, we're still trying to work through
Right,
how we would do that if it fits in. It's,
right.
that one's sort of on the bubble right now in terms of
Okay.
what we can afford.
Some of the 600 plus of school capital is specific to the high school, so that is shared with Whitman.
Okay.
And again, we've got to sort of work with Whitman and see what they're able to afford or they're proposing, so we've right now got everything they've asked, our share of everything they've asked for the high school for next year. But that's not to say Whitman can fund at that level, so that may, in the end, free up some money to do some of these other things like the library and Camp Kawani or not spend the money, so. The overlay reserve, annually, the assessors look at their provision for property tax abatements and exemptions, and if they haven't utilized it all, they'll release some that's then available for appropriation by town meeting. In recent years, we've utilized a modest amount, it's $20,000 here, specifically to fund the cost of pursuing delinquent taxes, putting them into tax title. So it's largely been used for legal fees associated with liening delinquent properties. The ambulance receipts reserved fund, we this year appropriated $300,000 to offset the operating budget and $325,000 to purchase a new ambulance. In 2020, we don't have any capital requirements, so what you see here is $350,000 that's being allocated to offset the general fund cost of the fire department operation. So that's strictly operating. And we do have this as a recurring source of funds to support the budget and replacement of ambulance and any other major equipment associated with emergency medical services. The last item under other is mainly offsets to our debt service. It's just over $129,000. This offsets dollar for dollar any of the Title V loans that the town has to help homeowners with septic repairs. So these are homeowner repayments of their betterment loans that we reserve to pay the related debt service. So there's no impact to the taxpayers. And then there's a very small amount in here, I think it's under $3,000, that relates to a bond premium at the time the town issued the bonds for the police station, and we were required to amortize that over the life of the loan for the police station. So all said and done, there's about $1.4 million there, but again, a large portion of that is allocated to our capital plan and small amount to go into our stabilization reserves. The next group of accounts, for the most part, do not go through town meeting these are funds that are being expended, but that we are required to expend but do not require town meeting authorization. The assessor's overlay or provision for abatements and exemptions. They've initially are looking at $175,000 as a reserve. I can tell you that this year, $131,000 was issued to taxpayers for statutory exemptions. So that's for surviving spouses, veterans, blind, elderly, and there's certain criteria. So the lion's share of this is, whether we set this amount or not, is going to go to exemptions to taxpayers if they qualify. The cherry sheet offsets, this relates $13,000. Again, this is part of the governor's budget. This is funds that will come to the town but they're not allowed to be used for the general fund or to support budgets. In our case, it's specifically aid to the public libraries. So it's almost like a grant, if you will, but it's an annual program that gives public libraries some additional funding for materials in their operations. So snow and ice, to Jim's earlier question, right now, and again, this is for FY 2020, not this winter, but next winter, I'm carrying a sum of $250,000. We're not proposing to raise the snow budget at all at this point for next year. But, you know, this would assume we'd spend $550,000 in 2020 based on a budget of $300,000. Certainly, if that changes, then I apologize, it's for this year. This would be the deficit that would be carried to the tax rate. So if we have a good winter, this number will go down or go away. So this is something through the budget process we'll watch and hopefully know before town meeting. It won't be snowing in May. So that may help us, to some extent, close the gap. But we don't have a crystal ball on the weather. So typically at this time of year, we do carry a reserve or an estimate of what we might need, so we don't get caught short. Cherry sheet charges, these are state charges and assessments, again, that don't require town meeting approval, that come through from the state. So they pay us some money through the so-called cherry sheet, but they also take some money away for things like mosquito control, for Old Colony Planning Council, air pollution, and that sort of thing. There are a number of state charges that flow through that way. I mentioned the $20,000 that under sources. Here we are as showing it as a use to support tax title related costs, which is mainly legal costs. And the last two items are appropriated through the town meeting process, through the omnibus, or not, through the budget. And our two enterprise funds, our solid waste enterprise fund, historically we've been subsidizing a portion of it. And the Finance Committee has worked with the Board of Health to try to moderate that tax subsidy. We, this year, have an $87,000 tax subsidy to the overall solid waste program. What we're proposing for next year is about a $3,000 increase to that subsidy, or $90,000. And that looks, in looking at their revenues and their expenses, that looks like that's maintainable for next year. They've got enough equity to carry, and that's using some of their equity. They do have enough equity to run a similar program probably for one more year after 2020. And then we really have an issue with how we finance that overall program. I mentioned that this year we're a little challenged with balancing the recreation operations. It looks like, based on what we know now, next year is even more challenging. So at this point, I have a placeholder here suggesting that if the budget submitted was fully approved, that it would require about $125,000 tax subsidy to cover the entire operation. And so that's something we haven't had to do in a few years. And this is a work in progress, so this is just, a starting point. But it certainly is of concern. The bottom quarter of the page, the exhibit, sort of outlines at a high level at our major functional areas the department requests. We've met with most of the major departments and made some adjustments, but there's more work to be done. The couple of things I would point out to you are in the general government area, we're proposing, I mentioned a new conservation agent, so that's an increase to the salary line because this year we just had a stipend for the former health agent, so that's a bit of an increase. We do have a full-time planner in the budget for next year. The IT budget needs some correction. some of which East Bridgewater will be reimbursing their share. And then, as I say, we've taken on the utility costs for the McQuon School. So those are a few variables in the general government area. In the public safety area, the one area to be noted would be communications. The chief has proposed adding another dispatcher. The cost is about $80,000. So there's a big bump to this budget, and I know the board's going to discuss that operation in more detail later tonight. So that's something that's sort of still in the works to see how that settles out. With respect to the regional school district and the regional vocational school, we don't have budget numbers from them yet. As Matt mentioned, the regional schools meeting, I think, on the 6th. The committee will probably vote an initial budget. So what we're carrying for tonight's conversation is 6.5% increase for the regional school assessment. And I believe it's a 6% for South Shore Regional Tech. So those numbers may come in higher. They may come, one may be lower, one may be higher. We'll adjust the overall look as we get data. So we just have placeholders in there because they haven't been through their full budget process. And of course, the other sort of drivers, if you will, are insurance and employee benefits. So the group health insurance is still not settled by our group that we're a part of. We expect that, Mike, in maybe March.
Yep.
So I'm hoping, if anything, we'll be able to bring this number down a little bit. And with respect to our insurance programs, as I mentioned earlier, we've added the McQuon School property to our list of insured properties, which has caused a little bit of a bump in the general insurance
How much
budget.
of a bump was that, Todd?
26,000 and change.
Thank you.
Yes. So again, back to the summary sources and uses at the bottom, we're carrying a modest amount for non-capital articles of $20,000. The overall capital plan that's still being developed by the capital committee at $869,000, and then the two contributions to the $50,000 to stabilization and $25,000 to school stabilization. Again, those last two are funded from free cash. So we can certainly choose to moderate those numbers or take them off, but it won't necessarily give us any funds for recurring operating costs, the budget. So at this point, and again, we're early in the process, we've got a lot of moving parts here, and some that we know we can tighten up. We're projecting about a $458,000 shortfall for the FY20 overall budget. But Mike and I need to do some more work on a few areas to see what we can do to mitigate that. Just briefly, with respect to the water fund, what you have in your packet, just wanted to note the salary line does not include any wage settlement for the union. That's their contract expires this June, and it hasn't been settled for the next period. So that may be adjusted between now and then, but that's fully supported through rates and through the water. So that's not a concern in terms of like a shortfall or anything. And I mentioned possibly introducing a subsidy for recreation, or at least some more work that needs to be done there. We still need about a $90,000 subsidy for solid waste, which is consistent with recent years. But just another reminder that this can only last for a couple more years, and then we really have a larger issue to deal with.
I think we're going to be discussing that this year.
Yes, wonderful.
Getting
Good.
on that.
Yeah,
Yep.
great.
Todd, what's indirect costs under recreation, the enterprise fund?
So indirect
5,000.
costs are primarily insurances, workers' compensation, and fringe benefits for their property or their employees. Yeah. Historically, the water department also would include use of the town's fuel system for gas and diesel, which we've now put into their line item expense budget, and police details for any road work that the water department had to do, they'd run through as an indirect cost. But we've now got a line in their expense budget. That's more of a direct expense.
So that 530 on the salaries, that may increase once the contract is settled?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yep.
Question, Jim?
Can I ask?
Absolutely. Good.
Of
Can I ask
course.
you one more question, Tom?
What, as many as you like.
Okay, well, I don't want to, I know you already have to print me up a 10-year sheet for the snow and ice.
Yes, sir. What else would you like?
Recreation.
Sure.
The subsidizing
Yes.
recreation.
Yes,
You wouldn't have one,
I do. I have a
One
20-year for
you
recreation.
have 20?
Yes, sir.
That'd be awesome.
I'll get you both.
That'd be great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Could you share that with,
Oh, the whole board, of course. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
I would have showed you my copy.
I'm sure you would have.
Does anybody have any more questions for Todd?
I think, Mr. Chairman, it's important to point out, and to the entire board, and Todd has brought it up, this is a work in progress, as it has been since I've been here and prior to me being here, that this is our first chop at the budget. As Todd has indicated, as recently as a couple hours ago, we were having conversations in regards to what we can do with one particular budget that we have concerns over. The school committee, as I think Selectman Dyer may have touched upon, we don't have their figures yet. That could be a swing in, I don't imagine it's going to be a swing in the negative direction, but as we've been able to do in the last couple of years, we're able to come together, the two committees, the two administrative bodies, and work through a budget that both the town and the school can live with. There are a lot of variables. Again, I'm kind of repeating Todd, but I want to emphasize some of these things. A lot of variables in terms of revenues. The governor's numbers are not necessarily the end numbers. There's a whole procedure by which it goes back and forth between the House and Conference Committee, and we're usually not looking at decent numbers till, I want to say,
July.
yeah, sometimes in bad situations into the ensuing fiscal year. At that point, we make our best guess. But, and we're not, I don't anticipate too great a swing in those particular numbers, but and it also is important to understand that as far as both the capital and as far as the operating budget, when it comes to the schools, that is all dependent upon what our partner can or can't do. And we are having talks, we've had talks with them as well as to where things might be going. So I know that the deficit might look a little daunting, and it's going to take a lot of work, it's going to take a lot of effort, it's going to take a lot of cooperation on the parts of people that sit in this building and may sit, in the other town. But we have been able to come in the last couple of years up with a balanced budget that didn't necessarily eviscerate either the schools or the municipality. There are things in this budget that I think we would like to do, I think are warranted, but in the end of the day aren't necessarily something we can afford. We've got to live within our means. And there's continuing budget number crunching that needs to take place and will take place. I thank Todd. I think Todd gives a much better presentation, can answer an awful lot more questions, hence my asking him to do the budget presentation in addition to doing his quarterly report. I rely extremely heavily on Todd, and I'd be remiss not to mention the involvement that Mary has in this as well. It really is a team effort, and we'll continue to work on it and continue to update you as we do narrow it down to something that will be balanced. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, next up is Daniel Pardo here. Okay. Daniel has he has submitted an application for appointment on the Housing Authority. Thank you for coming tonight. And it looks like, I read your thing, 13 years of experience. Does anybody else have any more questions in the insurance business?
And Mr. Chairman, this is a joint appointment by both the Board of Selectmen and the Housing Authority. You have a
Oh,
quorum,
okay.
right, Teresa?
So,
We're here to make Maryland.
okay,
Okay.
so how does
Gotcha.
that motion look?
The board can make a motion, the housing authority, but each board has to vote the appointment.
Okay, so
So-
I move that, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, that we vote to have Daniel Pardo fill the vacancy in the Housing Authority.
Second.
I'm thrilled that you stepped up. Thank you, Daniel.
Motion's been made and seconded? Yes, thank you very much. Does anybody have any more questions? All those in favor? 5-0 now. Thanks again.
And we need a vote of the housing authority as well.
So I'll make a motion on behalf of the Hanson Housing Authority that we also accept and welcome Daniel Pardo to the board.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Excellent. Thank you, guys.
We all set?
He is all set.
Thank you.
I will send you a note saying that you've been appointed,
And I'm
and
going
then
to
you
see
can
you
get sworn in by the
Thursday,
town.
right? Or is it tomorrow? Friday.
Friday.
Yes, I'll see you this week.
Yeah, Friday.
I don't think that's why they were here.
I didn't put that.
Just give them a second to leave.
Do you want to do the Class 2 license? He's the
Yeah.
guy in the wheelchair.
All right, next up, we have a discussion and possible vote
Mr. Chairman.
on regional 911. Yes.
Would you be so kind as to consider taking the Class 2 license renewal? We have the gentleman here, I believe.
Yes, I could do that. That's item 4. Class 2 license renewal. Upscale Auto, 169A Franklin Street. Are you here, sir? Okay. Hold on 1 second. So we have a letter. So he's looking to renew his auto license.
Right, he had an existing license that expires at the end of the year. The taxes, he had some taxes that were outstanding, which he has been paid, and the building inspector went and checked the property and had a few issues, so you have a copy of the memo from the
Yeah, so
building
I
inspector.
spoke with Bob on Thursday, and me personally, I don't have a problem giving him his license, but I would put some conditions on it to make sure that he gets this stuff done.
I think in the past, we've done a provisional,
Yeah.
so we give them a
Conditional.
certain conditional,
Yeah, so
you know.
after speaking with Bob, I think like 45 days. So, sir, we won't hold up your license, but however, we would want you to comply with the building inspectors, the items that are on this list.
Yes,
You know.
completed most of those today.
Okay, all right,
So
great.
you are aware of them and you're working on them and it's your intention to get them completed.
Yes.
Okay. So he'll get back to us on it, and like I said, if the board is so kind, I would support his license. We don't want to hurt a business, but we want you to comply by the rules, that's all.
So Mary, can you help us, what does that motion need to look like? We provisionally vote to renew this license conditioned upon him meeting the items outlined in Bob's memo?
And you can pick a date that you'd like it
So
done
moved
by.
in 45 days from today.
Yeah, I think just with the weather, I think,
That sounds good.
give him a little bit extra time.
Yeah.
So the motion's been made, was it seconded?
Second.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck, sir. Okay, next is, I think, the reason why most of you guys are here, discussion and possible vote on regional dispatch. Just give them a second to get out. So I put this on the agenda because this board we have to give Duxbury an answer on which way we're going with this. We've been kicking the can's probably not a good term, but we've been talking about this for a while. I think everyone's been over to the Rock and they've seen the facility over there. And it's just, we've got to make some decisions. What they're looking for is a letter of intent from this board if we are going to go over there. Me personally, I have been there. I believe that the product is a better product, and I think if we could save, we're obviously in the saving lives business, so if we can save a couple seconds or a minute off of a call, I think that's something that we really have to look at. And, we have great dispatches now, but I think it's, when you get multiple calls, they can only do so much, so. I would support it. The police department has some concerns. Mike has some concerns, and I think his concerns can be addressed. You know, I've heard, been in multiple meetings and had several discussions on this. The one concerning thing is the current employees, you know. So, you know, if we did go that way, I would support anybody's, you know, whatever thoughts or recommendation they had, because you know, our employees are, you know, we need to be grateful to them and, you know, and make sure we protect our
Of course,
employees.
they've been dedicated to us, they've
Yeah.
been, you know, they've served us well, and we don't want to kick somebody to the curb.
Right.
You know, we certainly want to make sure that the transition, if we decide to go that way, is, you know, as painless as possible to the
Right.
employees, the people that they're serving and the people that have
Right.
served us, so.
Right, so,
The only thing I've you know, and I loved the facility, I loved the product, I agree with everything that you just said. The one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is right now, the way that they're set up, we do not all have an equal seat at the table. It's Duxbury that kind of runs the show, and we can give them feedback, but it's not completely regionalized, if you will. Like, we've got the Whitman-Hanson Regional, where we each get an equal vote, and we get to decide how things are gonna be run. They're not there yet. I know they've talked about, and I've asked this every time I've talked to them, back from June of 2017, when I first got elected, and I went there, and then, you know, the most recent time that they came here, I've asked, when are we gonna be to the point where you've got an organization that we are gonna have an equal seat, an equal voice, and an equal vote, so that we're not at the whim of Duxbury deciding what they want to do, and, you know, we just kind of have to go along. And I'm not saying that's their intention. I know that they'll try to be as equal and, you know, like, you know, and certainly address our concerns, but I'm kind of a person who likes to see things in black and white and laid out, and although we know Duxbury has the best of intentions and that they'll work with us, and they've said that, and in good faith, and I think they're all good guys, and, you know, all of that, I don't have any personal problem with them, but the fact of the matter is, structurally, the contract with them will be them being the lead and us kind of being subject to what they decide at this point.
well, one of the things, I think that it could take a minimum of 12 months, maybe 18 months, I think, you know, if we decided to go that route. So they did say that, you know, that's what their goal is to create a separate entity.
Right.
So we would have
Yeah.
a seat at the table.
Yeah.
I would be afraid that we'd miss the boat. You
I
know
get
what
that.
mean?
I do get
So
that.
I
I
wouldn't
do.
wanna, you know, hold back and wait for that one reason, and then all of a sudden, you know, another town swoops in, and now all of a sudden they don't have any room for us either.
Can we make a motion if we're so inclined and if the rest of the board agrees? But if we were to move in that direction, can we put some kind of a time frame that, like, within 2 years, that organization will be put in place, or like, I don't want to be held hostage. I don't want to regret that we did this and then we've got no leverage over that organization getting put in place in a timely manner.
We'd have to ask them that question. Somebody from Duxbury Regional is here. Can one of you guys answer that question? Come on up and just identify yourself for me, please.
Sorry, I didn't realize you guys were here. I thought we were just like,
I'm Mike Mahoney, I'm the director.
yes, I remember you.
Thanks for
Yep.
coming, Mike.
Absolutely. Glad to answer any questions. As far as the freestanding district authority goes, we do have every intention of moving in that direction. The way the contracts are written now, typically we go for a 5-year bid, so to speak. That can certainly be adjusted to a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year, whatever the town of Hanson and the town of Duxbury agree to. So you could do the 2-year deal, and then if it's not a district, wash it away and go back. I will say that once you have regionalized, 911 is reluctant to put all of the equipment back
I
into
don't see
Hanson.
that. Realistically, it would be quite cumbersome to decouple us
yeah.
from you once we
Right,
regionalize.
exactly.
Yeah,
The fact of the matter is, you're absolutely right. I can't argue the fact that it's not in black and white written that it's an autonomous ruling body, but they created my position, and I've told everyone, ask around. Everything funnels through me now. It's not the town of Duxbury, and I do everything I can to answer each and every police and fire chief immediately, soak in all their concerns, questions, and we've dealt with them every time. So
No, and I'm sure you have. I have no doubt that you've been
Yeah.
responsive to everybody. But my concern is the devil's in the details. What if you're no longer there and suddenly there's a change, political change or change in personnel? And I just don't like to build a foundation built on something that's a little bit shaky. You seem like quite a fine gentleman, and I'm sure you've got the best of objectives. I have no doubt about that.
Thank you.
And I've met the staff, and I think that they're stellar as well. But what are we looking on an ETA in terms of getting that organization in place?
our plan is to have it by the fiscal year 20, to be a freestanding district authority by FY '20. There's still a lot of moving parts. We need 911 support to do that, and we need all of the other towns that are current members who are under existing contracts. So, say the town of Plimpton and the town of Halifax, they're in the midst of 5-year contracts. So we need to essentially reopen those contracts, negate them, and renegotiate as a district, since they all bought in for a 5-year deal as what they call a hosted site, hosted in Duxbury, and a fee for a service. Once we decide to change that model, so yes, it'd be great for Hanson to walk right in the door as a district, but those other existing communities, Duxbury included, needs to renegotiate now with a freestanding entity.
So really, the district isn't going to exist until they all agreed to become part of the district.
Correct.
So it isn't just a matter of you making that commitment to us. I assume they're all going to buy in,
Yeah,
because that's in their
it-
best
it
interest
is,
too.
yep.
Okay, so would you guys, and have you put in writing to the other to the other towns that this is your objective? And
Yes, as a matter of fact, we had a meeting just this week, or this past week, with all of the chiefs, which is essentially what becomes the operations board of the district. The police and fire chief on each town sit, and as you said, it's one town, one vote, or one town, two votes, police and fire.
Right.
And they've all been told that that's the plan, that's the wish, let's all get together. And we have a boilerplate sort of preemptive agreement that needs to be ironed out. The state provides it based on the legislation. This is what you need to do to form a district. And then we have to put in the pieces that are specific to our operation.
Okay, thank you. That's very
Absolutely.
helpful.
Any other questions?
Are we gonna hear from both the chiefs on any comments, questions, or concerns? Yeah, absolutely.
If they want. Do you guys want to speak briefly? Chief Dawson, Chief Mix? You can go, Mike.
I haven't, I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't been a fan of this from the beginning, for a number of reasons, and it's not against Duxbury. I think they do a good job. You have to understand that the communications is in my building that falls under me. Fire has brought up some concerns. This coming year's budget, we tried to address some of those concerns. We won't fully address those. For me, it's been very difficult, not only because I care about the people that are working there and how dedicated they are, but also my ship's sailing fine. I don't need change, and I don't need to rock my boat. You know what I mean? So it's tough. That being said, I've tried to keep an open mind. I've gone through all the different scenarios. The biggest thing that I would need from the board, and it's been brought up in the past, is I cannot shut the lights off in my station. Okay, the biggest problem when I've talked to other towns that, I shouldn't say biggest problem, it's not necessarily a fair term. One of the biggest issues that has come up is if there's not somebody in that station, there's a cop constantly getting called back, mainly on the 4 to 12s. I know Halifax, that's one of their frustrations. I don't need morale problems, and I don't need to change or have any issues in my place. More importantly, I need to make sure that the citizens are getting served the way they should. If you decide to go that route, I've looked at it a few different ways. I've talked to Norwell, who went through this 7 years ago. They've put civilian clerks on their desk. There's a lot of things that they do for us that nobody realizes, from helping us keep an eye on prisoners, to taking care of a lot of the paperwork. Some of the stuff I understand Duxbury will be able to do for us, but it's still not a body in there when somebody comes in the middle of the night. So I've dug deeper into this. I shouldn't say the dispatch has been tasked with doing all the counting. I think the lowest month we had was 150 people walk into the station,
After hours,
just during the day,
during
at any
the day.
time.
Okay.
The busiest times are during the day and the 4 to 12. Slowest time is midnight to 8. The problem is that 2 or 3 people that walk in after midnight in the middle of the week, there's a big problem, and they need some help.
Yeah, they're not just dropping by to say
They're not
hi.
looking for directions, and they don't need the bathroom. No. There's usually some type of issue going on. So the next thing comes down to money, and I've broken it down different ways. We're not solid on the money. Unless, Mike, have you gotten anything?
No, and part of the reason for that is the range I had given you, Chief. The low end of that range is where we stand today as a fee-for-service, and the top end of that range, I think, is as a district freestanding and assuming any and all expected collective bargaining changes.
Okay. And to that note, 911 can't give me 100% guarantee. They've said 150 to 200,000. After we met with them last year, digging around what the town costs 911 right now, I'm fairly confident that the 200,000, the upper end, would be reasonable. Or we could fight them for it. I think we could do that. The thing is I still need to take care of that station in those duties. So I'm gonna have to deal with the police union, which I don't think will actually be objecting to anything, because a lot of these duties are what I would call blended duties. It's not really necessarily, it's not written out in the dispatcher's contract that they have to eyeball prisoners on the video screen, because, well, that's just common sense, right? In the meantime, the cops have to come in and physically check them on a regular basis. Yes, sir.
Mike, I just wanted to stop you right there, just for a second, and I'll be the first to say, I don't know how the rest of the board feels. The station will not go dark.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah,
Ever.
yeah.
So,
Well,
okay?
that is my big fear.
It's not gonna happen. The
We haven't taken a
station
vote,
will
but
never
I
be
think
dark.
generally, you know,
Right.
yeah, I don't think that's any of
So-
our objectives.
The thing is, I've tried to look at this from every direction, and if you decide to go that way, will I live? Yes. Will we still function? Yes. The most efficient, probably, way for us to function, as in service-wise, I would look at hiring 4 cops to offset the loss of these people. If you go the clerk route, I'm not that thrilled with that. It would be actually using the current clerical union contract versus brand-new offices. The current clerical union contract for the town would be more money. Cops, I don't have to pay some of the other benefits like missed meals and missed breaks. You can make them just deal with the 8 hours and not give them those, or let them find them on their own. Whereas civilian employees, we do have to abide by that. That adds overtime and other issues to it. I don't know, the money, I don't know, Todd, I've thrown stuff at you, I don't know. Now I'm throwing something back to you. That's out of my hands. Money isn't my thing. I know how it'll affect me, but I don't know how we'll pay for it, but again, that's not my issue, so to speak.
Any questions?
One question. So you just said with the clerical union that we would have to pay them for their missed meals?
If they were in the station, yeah.
Why wouldn't they be able to go take their meals because they're not on the phone?
Yeah, you can't let them, it's still not gonna be,
We
if I start letting people leave that area, God knows where
We
you'll
wouldn't
find
be
them.
able to have
Yeah,
an
it's-
officer on the street come in just for that half hour for that coverage?
Oh, we
or-
could, I mean, possibly, but that, again, look, if I look at it this way, if we hire 4 civilians to take care of that, we actually need 4.5 civilians to cover the full hours. If we do that, AFSCME's gonna come in and form a union, one way or another. And yes, they're gonna wanna address that. If I'm gonna bring the cops in to sit in there, then I'm gonna have to negotiate that with the officers too. So there's impact bargaining that you're gonna have to deal with both unions. Right now, my biggest fear is any one of those 4 that are currently there walking away. It takes at least 4 months for me to train somebody. If they leave, I got an even bigger problem. And we're shifting one off.
Right, we just voted on that, yeah.
We're shifting one off right now, so I'm hoping to get somebody waiting in the wings, but hope isn't a plan. Any other questions?
I know we're gonna hear from Jerry, but I would also like to hear from Todd on the financial, there seems to be a lot of, yeah. I think it's
I don't know that
important,
we can
need-
answer all those questions tonight as far as the
Well, are we
financial.
being expected to vote on it tonight?
Absolutely
Well, then
not
I
if we
need to
can't
know the
get all
numbers. I
questions answered.
can't vote unless I know numbers too.
Todd, you want to speak to that? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I just saw some of the chief's numbers this morning, so I'm not prepared to tell you what makes sense or doesn't. We've got a budget proposal at about $480,000 for next year. This year's budget's $400,000. If it's gonna cost us $2 to buy in, that gives us $200,000 to do something with staffing before we have any budget increase. And I think the chief was looking at 260
For which one, I'm sorry?
for the officers.
4 officers, 259,000.
So that would mean about a $60,000 increase. Right now, the budget's proposed at an $80,000 increase. I don't know if that helps you. And that's not to say that proposal is the right one. I mean, he's got a few different options, and I think it requires a little bit of study, but I think the range of budget increase is 60,000 instead of the current budget at 80. I don't know, does that,
I mean, yes, that is helpful. It isn't all financial, that's a component
No,
of this, but
that's right.
safety is obviously the primary
Oh,
factor
sure,
here.
sure.
We want to make sure that we're not losing any ground on that.
Right.
And potentially we're gaining ground. And I don't want to lose money. So, we've got to kind of balance it. So I just needed some sense about whether, this was like going to cost us $500,000 to do or,
I think it's relatively cost neutral at this point, from what I've seen, which I just saw this morning. So,
And I think a lot of it has to do with what the board wishes to see in the future in terms of the operation. You had mentioned, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, that you don't want to see the station go dark. But there are different, as the police chief has pointed out, there are different scenarios behind, how we go about doing that. There is the possibility of bringing in civilians. It could actually be more expensive than bringing in additional police officers. However, that's predicated off of our belief that whoever we brought in for clerical would have to mirror what we have here for clerical at town hall. And, that's something we would have to look into. I think, rule of thumb is probably it would have to be comparable, but that's why you have negotiations. That's why, you get into those sorts of things. But there are some other moving parts to this, and, one way or the other, dependent upon the board's direction, we'll work to do the best we can to fulfill what the board wants to do. The board wants to go regional, it wants to keep the station lit up, or whatever the right saying would be, at night. That's something we'd have to sit down and work through and come back and give you what our proposal is. Again, based on, I think, what Selectman Hickey just said, and I think the whole board agreed with, that you do not want to see a dark station.
can we just, do we agree? I agree. I want a person in there. I know some of the places that have tried to not have a dark station have used some, technology, but to me, that is not the same as having a person. And if you're in some type of a crisis in the middle of the night, I don't think you want to be talking to a security camera in the lobby. That's just my opinion. But,
I agree.
yeah,
I think in the middle of the night, I want to be talking to an officer.
exactly, yeah.
Well, again, I think at the end of the day, the board gives the two chiefs town administrator, the town accountant, the direction in which it wishes to go, and we come before you and tell you how we think it's gonna work.
So can you walk through, this is a memorandum of understanding that we're entering into, is that right?
It's a letter of intent.
Okay, so can you walk me through next step? We enter into the letter of intent, and then what happens?
Then they start working with 911 as far as what we're gonna get for money, and
And that's
they begin the
still an
process of
unknown.
adding on additional town.
And we start negotiating our needs, within reasonable, parameters, and discuss with the chiefs implementation, transition.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
And there's, not that this should necessarily be a deciding factor, but, one of the other thoughts is, or one of the other factors in this is the state, whether it's state 911 or whatever the entity is, they would give us some upfront, new radios or a new system or things of that nature to take into consideration as well. I think that'd probably be a one-time sort of thing. And again, as I think you've all indicated, the real goal in this is public safety within budget, within what we can carry. So, but again, I think you should take that into consideration as to, what the state is willing to give us that, could offset a potential capital cost now or in the future. But we don't know what that is, but we don't know what that
I think
is.
we would have an expected date or an ETA of July 1, 2020
Okay, all right.
would be.
So there's some time to discuss some of these things, but some of the stuff
Yeah,
we kind of need to know
we're not gonna have all
upfront.
the answers
Yeah,
tonight,
Yeah.
But I truly believe that we can overcome the police chief's objections. I truly believe that.
Concerns.
Concern. Yeah.
And I think just to follow up on the budget question, one other thought is, what level of staffing would we prefer to have if we stay in Hanson? And I think the answer might not be one dispatcher. So when you sort of, fill that out to where it ideally should be for the service, for the
Then that's
community,
gonna- yeah.
then that cost is quite a bit more than even what is proposed for next year, as far as the local cost.
Yep, that's a good point. Chief Thompson, you want to add to this?
Like Chief Mick said, he wasn't a proponent of this. I am a proponent of it, and I think that it's something that we need to look at. I think there's a lot of advantages for us to go over there, but I understand his concerns completely, and I do believe that we have to have somebody in that station. Some of the capital items for our infrastructure that other towns were able to receive by going regional in the first year were tremendous to improve their infrastructure. It's not a guarantee down the road, but that improved their infrastructure. And that's something, talking with a gentleman from Duxbury, that's something that's possible. He brought up some great points about, 2 a.m. We're looking at originally putting on an impact shift of dispatching. And that's great, but what happens when we get something at 2 a.m. where those statistics didn't show that that's an impact time and we have one person there? And they do a great job, but I think you all saw you just can't do the job of 3 people with 1 person. Now, it only might happen once in a while, but it does happen. So I'm concerned about that, and I'm also concerned about down the road where possibly we could get forced into going regional, because that's what we're hearing. And I think this is an opportunity now for us to get on board where we can actually bargain and get some things for our community and get in without being forced and saying, you're gonna have to do this. Now, is that definitely gonna happen? We have no idea.
There's certainly incentivizing people pretty strongly.
So my concerns are with his on being dark. As a taxpayer and a resident, I believe that if you're gonna put somebody in there, you should put police officers in there. Obviously, there's a cost, so I mean, we're gonna have to look at all that. But then again, adding that one impact person and doing a trial period for a year, we might find out that we need 2, or we don't, but we can't predict that. But at the end of the day, if we want to be efficient, you would probably end up having 2 dispatchers on at all times. And that might be 5 or 6 years down the road, but you need to look at that cost compared to what it's gonna cost to go to the regional. So I would just ask that you guys take all the information and make an informed decision, and whatever decision you make, I will support 100%, we'll move forward.
Well, Jerry, let me ask you this then, because this could possibly be the most important decision I make as a selectman. On Saturday, January 12th at 1:32 in the afternoon, you and Mike both got an email from Mike I have it right here. And there are no answers to any of these 4 questions. Because you just said, make sure I'm informed, and this is what I was gonna ask Mike about. Because there is gonna be a cost. And you said once in a while, something could happen at 2 AM. I don't want that once in a while to be in Hanson. I don't want a dock station. I don't want a once in a while. I want to make sure that I am informed. I have all the analysis and all the answers that I need to make sure that I make the vote.
No, agreed, and like I said, my concern is equal with his as far as having a person in there, but I also have the same concern that if we have a building fire and something else going on, there's only one dispatcher, so that's a concern of mine also, so.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it could come down to a money situation, but we can't, if we don't go, then we need to address in my opinion, having only one dispatcher on duty, and that's what you guys have to make a decision on.
So I can answer these to the best of my ability at the moment, and we kind of did. We have, sorry, we've been talking quite a bit, trust me.
Well, I figured.
So total cost which Duxbury plans to assess, they gave me a range of 350 to 425,000. They can't narrow that in. That's still accurate.
Yeah, as I said, so the low range there is where we stand right now. We have expected collective bargaining happening as we speak. And then the cost of actually becoming a freestanding district that elevates some of our operational costs, that's the high end of what's worst case scenario or best case scenario, depending on which side of the negotiating table you're on, and the cost of creating a district would be the high end of that. I would probably say we're closer to 400. Yeah, less 200,000 from 911.
So that's question number 2, this total subsidy from the state, and if Hanson were to join regional dispatch. I'm confident that they would give us 200, because from the homework I did, I cost them 150 now. Because they'll pull out the 911 equipment, and they'll save in licensing fee and fiber. The reason I say, remember that I cost them 150, is we're eligible now. We haven't been in the past, but we took on wireless, so we upped our eligibility for grant money. We have a total eligibility of $50,000 in grant money from 911. That being said, that's a potential loss from fiscal 20, in fiscal 20. The other thing, though, is Todd mentioned earlier with your IT thing, you have to fully fund that $50,000. It's a reimbursement grant. Historically, what I've been doing, if I didn't need some equipment or I didn't need to offset any costs, like this year I'm going to have to offset some salary costs because we've had people leave. That money, Todd and I would discuss at the end of the year. Todd might leave a little bit in there as some like emergency money for me, or it rolls back over to free cash, general fund free cash. So the contribution from the state figure realistically is 150, because we'll lose that 50. Third question was total cost of an additional dispatcher to satisfy the needs of Hanson. That's for the impact shift. That's the budget that's been submitted. That budget for fiscal 20 is, and the figures are rounded to the nearest like 1,000 for the most part, because I didn't think anybody wanted to hear cents. 461,000 would be for 5 dispatches. Okay. Without the 5 dispatches, the 4 dispatches would be 372,000. Total cost of any and all training for current and future dispatches. The training, they have to do 16 hours of training every year. Part of that $50,000 grant, we're eligible for $10,000 for reimbursement for tuition, overtime, or personnel costs. Historically, I've been doing anything from $7,000 to up to $9,000. Again, it's a reimbursement grant, so if you don't spend 10, you can't put in and get the 10. So that's usually I always figure on $8,000. That's figured into that 372, basically. And again, it was kind of emergency money. Those are the 4 questions on here.
Okay.
I can play with other numbers for you, but
You had mentioned before that if we did this, lost the dispatches, and you would have to hire, because I think we all agree that we don't want a dark station.
yes,
That you'd have to hire 4 officers,
yes.
and the total of that was 259,000.
So what I used for figures was 4 first step officers with a bachelor's degree, because that changes their salary, would be 259,000 plus the night differential. Well, that includes the night differential.
Okay.
But that's year 1. Year 2, they each go up about 3,000, in step raises. So down the road, it's going to keep growing. On the flip side, yeah, your dispatches are going to keep growing. They're at right now they're all figured at step 4, their highest step. They're going to go up on average 2% a year, anyways. One of the reasons I know you asked earlier, the missed meals is one of the reasons the cops would be a little less expensive than clerks. Was also I can slightly supplement with the officers. If you got 4 full-time civilians, they work 5 and 2. If you got 4 full-time officers, they're working 4 and 2. If you have 5 and 2, there's always one 8-hour shift still open. If you cover them 24/7, there's one 8-hour shift that you fill with a part-time person. That's what we do now. If I go 4 and 2, I can supplement that by adjusting the schedule. Like I used to have a 6 and 2 officer on the road. I'd probably have to do away with that. I don't have it right now because I'm down an officer anyways. But I would slightly take away less coverage on the road to handle that. That little bit of sacrifice for less coverage on the road really would be a benefit because the officers are constantly called back in to deal with people in the lobby anyways. Because the civilians just can't give legal advice. There's certain things they just can't do. And on the flip side, the officers don't want to be handing out records requests and accident reports, but again, we can impact bargain that. So that's why the officer price is a little off, if that makes sense. Clerks using step 1, clerical union figures, and then figuring in missed meals, it would be about 263,000, as opposed to the 372 I'm paying now, or the 259 for cops. If we can get the deal that Norwell did, their next year's budget for their clerks is 241,000. I don't know exactly. I mean, he gave me a spreadsheet and his proposed budget. It makes sense, but their contract would be probably a little different than what I'd anticipate a contract here to be.
All right, I think we heard enough on this.
Okay, I
you
mean,
have
I
a
would
question?
like to, no, I don't have a question.
Okay.
But I mean, I think in all fairness to the public, I like to say that in the last 2 years, Mike Mahoney has hosted, all 5 of us have gone down to Duxbury and seen the operation. So, as a 40-year teacher, of course, I always put education as number 1, but then public safety is number 2. And watching 3 dispatchers, plus a shift supervisor, on duty, watching them talking diabetic vomiting through while police and fire were responding, that in itself was impressive. So I was impressed. I was completely positively impressed by the entire operation. Then, as an alarmist, I just have been thinking ever since then, okay, so the big storm will come. Not this year, I don't know when, but you can, as someone who believes strongly in environmental climate change, it's like, it's coming, and the night will come of a bad storm when there'll be a car and truck collision on Main Street with catastrophic injuries there. I will have a heart attack in my driveway shoveling snow within the 15 minutes of that, and a house fire will start. And I could see where regional dispatch could handle that They would be, it would be a little tense, but I could see where they could handle it, whereas we in Hanson, I mean, if we had even two guys on, two dispatchers on at the time, it would quickly be a crisis situation, and I think I think life would be lost. So by the time I was through with our visit and trying to evaluate what I had seen and trying to just think about, I don't know, our own situation. I mean, I'm very positive. I will just say right now, if this comes up for a vote, I absolutely am a positive vote to start looking into the process of regionalization, getting this letter of intent going. That's where I stand, and it really was predicated mostly on that visit and just watching the way a team operated rather than one or two people. Mike also said at the time, he said that every dispatcher from a town who applied then for regional dispatch and could pass the test, I mean, they were tested, was hired. That was 100% hiring. And still is today. So it's not that our Hanson dispatchers are then left in the lurch. I mean, every one of them, I thinking, is welcome to apply, and so far, they've all been hired. So, I mean, the only thing, the test, but I assume that all our dispatchers are qualified to pass the test. So I don't see that as a hurdle. So I don't think it leaves anyone of our town public employees in the lurch. That's why I personally would vote for regionalization. That's my rationale.
Does anybody else have anything to add?
No, I definitely want to look at the contract or an example of a contract just to see what we're going to be getting into. And then also, I just want to see the numbers here on my paper rather than, oh, I think he said this.
Right. Well,
And I think that we
this
need
is
to-
where we can talk numbers all day long, but we're not going to have exact numbers. And this is something we shouldn't be basing a decision on financially. We're talking about saving lives. The money will work.
Right, well, what I'm saying, Kenny, is I would like to see, okay, what is it going to cost the town of Hanson if we had to bring on 2 dispatchers for 24 hours? Let's look at option A, B, and C rather than, okay, Matt's Chicken Scratch says 350 to 425. You know, I want to see it written out, typed out from the chiefs
I think-
and the options.
I think Todd said it was 80,000 we just added for that other dispatcher? So it would be, I'm assuming it would be 4 dispatchers.
I'm 100% with Matt on this. I hear and I appreciate what Todd's saying. I appreciate what these guys have said. I want to see something in front of me. I don't want to be doing a gut reaction to what people have kind of come up with here, and I appreciate everybody's professionalism, and I'm sure that it's well thought out, but I would like to see something that I'm responding to, and knowing that, you know, there's going to be variables, and it may be a little bit higher or a little bit lower because there's some negotiation involved, but as Mr. Hickey alluded to, this is potentially one of the most important decisions we're making. And I don't want to do it willy-nilly without the damn numbers in front of me. I'm sorry, I just don't.
Can we ask Mike, is there a way between now and our next meeting that we could get a simple spreadsheet that says this is the option for the second dispatcher in Hanson?
Yeah,
This is the option.
I think that can be done again with the caveat that the numbers aren't necessarily.
Absolutely. I mean, Mike.
With you take it with a grain of salt.
Obviously,
yeah,
he can
and-
present their figures.
Yeah, and
So
Chief
Mike,
could-
is it true that we can't get the exact number what 911's going to give us until we have that letter and you submit it to them, or no?
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Here's where we are today, and it was said earlier today, to coin a phrase, kicking this can down the road for 2 years is not gotten us anywhere. I 100% appreciate the girls, what they do for the town, and Bruce and Dave, everyone over there does a phenomenal job. But the fact of the matter is, one person cannot do the job that 6 people can do. It's simple mathematics. In 2 years, 5 years, if you're going to have 2 people working around the clock, that requires 9 full-time employees. If you have 4 now, you're adding 5. If one's costing you 80 grand, 4's costing you a lot more than that. 5's costing you even more. So
To be clear,
if we're
the
worried about
majority of
the
us want to,
Yeah.
are leaning in the direction, but without it being dark, but leaning in the direction of regionalizing, but you need to help us, like,
And that's what I'm trying to do.
So the 100, like, even if you can give us a parameter, like, worst case is 150, but awesome case would be you get 250, and then, that type of thing, broken down in front of us.
And that's what we have. We have
Okay, we didn't.
worst case was
Yeah.
given to the chiefs from 911, verbatim. Here it is. Worst case is you get 150. Best case is you get 200 in incentive funds. They can't tell you how much you'll get in development funds until we make the request that you want a fiber loop, you want a new radio system. They'll pay for all of these things, but we have to request it.
They is the state.
State,
Yeah.
911. So in order to do that, we need a letter saying, yes, the town of Hanson wants to regionalize their 911 service and their dispatch service. As far as taking care of the people, that's my priority number 1 too. I've worked with these people. I worked part-time in Hanson. I was a resident for 30 years. It means a lot to me to take care of the town. And I think the best case is to regionalize. And if the numbers are the problem, then honestly, it shouldn't matter. It's public safety is what we're talking about here. And a few dollars here or there, I think putting 4 cops on the road is the best thing that'll ever happen to the town. And I say on the road, on the force, they may still be in the building. You can do it with clerks. I think the clerk number might be a little inflated. I think you could use part-time clerks. You don't pay benefits. And I wonder about some of those numbers, the salary numbers, if that includes OPEB, health benefits, all that, chief. No, that's strictly numbers. So those $400,000 numbers are far more.
I don't think anybody here is saying it's all about the numbers, but we have to factor that in. Let's be real, we just heard Todd's budget update. We've got to be cognizant of the numbers. So we know that this is probably a better product in a lot of ways, but at what cost?
So that's what I'm saying is, based on the numbers the chief has there and the numbers 901 has provided, it's not a cost increase. It's a cost savings to regionalize, by far. It's a guarantee.
Chief, you're shaking
You
The
you
chief
save
is
money.
shaking his head. Todd told us it was net neutral, and you're telling us it's a savings.
It's a
Which
savings.
is why I want to see it in writing. I'm sorry, but, like, obviously, we've got a difference of opinions, and I appreciate.
So what is it that we want to see in writing?
I want to see, Chief Mix is telling us he's got a proposal. I want to know how much it's going to cost to implement what he's saying he wants to do. To not have the station dark, to do, and then I'd like to have him say, if we've got part-timers, this is what it's going to be. If I have dispatch, that's part of the union, this is what it's going to be. If I have police officers, it's going to be this. And worst case scenario, we'll get 150 back. I need to see that in front of me. Am I the only one? Or
No, Laura, I agree with you, because this does not tell it all. And I think we need to see the spreadsheets on it. Because another thing that we should also consider is Whitman. They joined a regional dispatch, and their price went up. And then we've also seen regionalization in the past. The state, we'll subsidize it, and then look at where we are right now with the regional
Whitman signed a
schools.
contract and they knew the price increase was.
So I'm just saying, I just want to see a contract. I just want to see a spreadsheet. I don't think that's really much to ask for to make a decision on behalf of the town of Hanson.
Right.
Yes.
And I'll be fair too. I was one of the biggest critics of the regional dispatch. I talked to officers, I talked to former chiefs, and I got the good and the bad and everything. But at the end, they said regional dispatch is a great product, and there's no disputing that. They just had concerns about management from some of the biggest critics, and we discussed that. But it sounds like they're smoothing it out with Mike's position and whatnot. But I just need to see the numbers just to make a good, solid decision, because a sheet of paper, an old email, does not tell me.
And I don't think any of us want to kick the can down the road. We just, if you could give us this info, we can move to the vote the
No, I'm
next
just
meeting.
asking what do you want the numbers? Because obviously he can't give you hard numbers
No,
until
but
we do
just
that.
the parameters he gave, but
Right.
just see it in writing. Like it's worst case is 150 to 200, and I've seen other towns, similar towns, get this much, and when they've asked for the
Captain Reed.
Sure. Should I come up here?
Sure, come on up.
Just for the sake of the cameras.
Sure. How you doing? My name is Captain Reardon.
I used to run the Rock before Mike took over as the director, but I just wanted to go over a couple things because I know there's a lot of concerns. It's a huge decision. I was responsible for helping to bring Plimpton in, Halifax, and Rochester. Well, they all had the same concerns you have. In order to go to that next step, to start to figure out these numbers, we need to get you to sign something so that we can sit down with the head of 911. And we welcome you to come, the chiefs to come, so we can negotiate that dollar figure. I can tell you you're going to get $200,000. Why am I saying that? Because I've done these deals with the other towns already. I've met with them. But there's a lot of things to consider before we can start to say this 200. What year are you coming in? Are we coming in next year? Are we coming in 2 years? Is this a 5-year deal? That's the stuff 911 needs to hear, and we need to negotiate and figure out. A contract? Absolutely. We're going to sit down and work on that contract. If we don't have a contract that works out, then we don't have a deal. Right?
Okay, that's what
So-
I had asked.
Those are the things.
That-
Those are the things we need to figure out. Your concerns about the cost increases, we put that into the contract. That's already in other towns' contracts. I know what you've read in newspapers about other centers, but might not actually be true what you're putting forth. I think other people have some information on that. So if you have any other questions, let me know. We've worked with these other towns before. It's not like we're signing tonight and this is a done deal. We need
That's
to know
what I had
everything.
asked
We have a
earlier.
ton of work.
That's what I,
This-
that's what I asked about the timeline. Because if this is just, let's get into a discussion, you guys get to talk to the state, I have no problem moving to that vote. If we're talking about something more solid that's completely
We
binding
don't have
us to the-
contracts figured out.
Okay.
There is so much work to, this will be the 4th town that we're brought in for a total of 5 towns. There's so much work that needs to be done as far as figuring out what the fire chief needs at his station, what the police chief needs at his station. There's so much that needs to be done. And it's not going to be a 1-month process. We're talking months and meetings and meetings. The town of Rochester, smaller than you, I probably did 40, 50 meetings. FinCom, Selectmen, police, fire. There's so much involved in this. This isn't a sign tonight and we're done.
Okay, Rob, so can I ask you in layman's terms?
Sure.
The Board of Selectmen decides to go with the letter of intent.
Right.
Now we start talking. If we don't like the contract, we don't sign it.
Yeah.
That's what I had
Okay.
asked
I mean,
earlier.
it's going to take a while to figure out the contract. So we'll probably give you a boilerplate contract. You're going to bring it to your legal, and your legal is going to say, nope, I don't like this, I don't like this, I want this changed. That's what we've done with the other towns. We've worked out how they want it done, and we've learned as we've gone along.
I'm ready to move on this then.
Matt,
Yeah.
given that, I feel differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I move that we approve entering into a letter of intent with the regional dispatch.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Does anybody have any questions?
No, but Kenny, I think one thing too that we should do right now is thank all our public servants here in the town of Hanson, firefighters, dispatchers, EMTs, police, and anyone else.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your service. And this is nothing to say anything about anyone's job performance, but just a thank you, and we want to make sure we provide a good service to our town.
Right,
Thanks.
well said. Okay, all those in favor? 5-0. Thank you to everyone for your input, your discussion.
Thanks.
All right, let's see where we are.
Take a recess, 5 minutes, get everybody out.
Do we want to take old business
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, let's take, Carol, let's take a 5-minute recess, please.
Rob O'Brien, if I came down to the fire station, could you give me a
Okay, thank you. We're back on. Okay, I'm gonna move around a little bit here. Next is vote to sign the highway contract. Did you guys get to see the contract?
Yes. But can I just ask, as a new person who really doesn't understand all this, so we have a contract here that runs from July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2020. And that contract was signed by the former Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
So I don't understand.
No, it wasn't signed.
No, I'll
Okay.
explain it.
All right, thank you.
I've explained it to a couple of people individually this evening because of that confusion. What the former Board of Selectmen did is they signed that 4 or 5 page document in your hand, which is the memorandum of agreement, which encapsulated all of the negotiated changes to the overall CBA, I can't remember.
Collective bargaining
Collective
Collective
bargaining
bargaining
agreement.
agreement?
Now, what we've been doing is going back and forth here and there. It's been implemented. Everything that was negotiated, the raises, any sort of change of conditions and working, and that particular contract, there wasn't anything too significant. All that's been implemented. So all this is housekeeping in terms of incorporating what you have in your hand into the overall, 26, 27 multi-paged CBA, the contract. So, but all that being said, Wes, I sent back the contract with what we believe are all the last needed changes to the union the end of last week. I have not heard back from the union yet. So
Yeah.
I do not want you to sign that this evening because I do not want to come back to this board at the next meeting and say, I need you to sign this again because they moved an I or they changed the semicolon. So that particular item, although I invite you, and I'm glad it's in front of you, and I'm glad you asked that question, there is no action that I'm seeking before this Board of Selectmen until I have a guarantee in writing from the union, and I don't think there's any fault per se, but that this is the last thing you're gonna sign. I'm not coming back to you in 2 weeks and you're signing something else.
All right, and there's no pinning blame on this. Is this standard procedure? I mean, that this
Why is it taking
this
so
is
long?
2 years
It gets
later.
Yeah, it does get kicked back and forth because, in all honesty, and I'm not going to blame the union at all for this, but they've gotten what they wanted. They've gotten the Board of Selectmen signed the increase in wages, or they agreed to whatever the stipend change might be, or blah 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 blah. So at that point, they're not in any great big hurry because they've gotten what they've asked for. So usually it's somewhere far down the road that the two sides sit together and, oh yeah, well, let's iron this out, let's iron this out. It's just not at that point, the hot burner thing is that MOA and the agreement. And we go forward and we budget it and go to town meeting and all of that.
Also, along the way, some issues came up with some changes that may have happened at the highway or the transfer station that they wanted to resolve so they could incorporate it into the contract. So, that was one of the...
And we'll be beginning contract negotiations
Probably
next year. Well, before
Yeah.
next year, but I mean,
Right.
next year it'll be a new contract.
Yeah, usually about 6 months prior to the expiration is when they'll send us a letter wishing to negotiate, and then we'll start over again.
All right, Mary, on the MOA, page 3, it's number 3, Article 13, Section C, which is Section 13.9, health insurance. Can we just, fifth becomes 50?
This has already been signed. So, we can make sure is it within the contract? Is it in the contract where it's the error?
And
Or is
let's
this
look
just
at
the
the
MOA?
MOA.
You're looking at the MOA.
The MOA.
Yeah, I'll look in the contract and see if it's actually...
When you sign the actual final contract.
And the other
What,
thing is, this isn't the
section was
only
it?
contract that's not signed. There are others, just
So
to
it's
fair
under-
warn you.
what's
Mary,
section?
I'm gonna give you mine.
Yeah, no, I see what you're talking about. I will, I'm just gonna look in the contract, the way it sits right now in the contract, section
Yeah, I see
13.9.
So review that contract, guys
So it's
and girls, so then when Mike tells us it's ready to be signed, and
Well,
we'll
this,
be ready.
again, and that may have been finished, that may have been corrected in the final contract, so, but we'll make sure that
But you're gonna let us know when we can.
Well, it should, yes.
All right, the next meeting.
Had every expectation.
Okay,
it would have been.
excellent, thank you.
13.9, yeah, pay 50%, 50% is corrected in the contract, in the integrated contract.
Okay, good, thank you, Mary. Okay, next we have a request from the Cub Scouts. For-
Actually, they've asked that we table this. They were gonna be coming to the meeting, but there was a basketball game going, so they
Okay.
weren't gonna make it, so they will.
On to
we'll table
old
it till-
business, thank you, Mary. Request for the street light at Main Street and Brookside. So did you guys all get a chance to read the policy? I reached out to the highway surveyor, last Thursday to ask him about this, and he said 100% absolutely there needs to be a light there. So I know that Mike had said they already supported it. At that point, when I spoke to Bob, I didn't have this in front of me. I read this on Sunday, so based on what Bob said and reading this policy, I think this thing is just outdated, and it's,
And we will, and the board asked last Tuesday for us to take a look at what was the existing policy. We've taken a look at that, as the chairman notes there. I think it actually speaks of the executive secretary, so that shows you how old it is.
Right.
we went through what I think were the criteria of that standing policy, and I think that the request meets most, if not all of those. I also add that I reached out to the chief of police, who is in this policy, and he is in agreement in terms of putting that particular light up.
Do we need a street lighting committee
We have one.
That-
We have
I
a
mean-
street
Well,
safety
should-
that
committee.
are inactive, I take it? But I
Right.
mean,
You don't want
It's
to
time to-
usurp their power.
not at all. It's like, is it time to just sort of review the policy and just update it?
Well, yes, I think that's the case, but I again, and it's the board's, at the board's pleasure, but I think this particular request meets those criteria, and,
Totally
you know,
agree.
we promise you that it's probably not at the next meeting, but we'll work on it, and we'll take a look at whether the standing committee makes sense as it's currently constituted. And, you know, we approach these things, this is something that doesn't come off all that often, I think I may even mentioned at the last meeting. When these things come up and this question's asked, then we go back and we work on them as they become
Okay.
current, so,
Are you comfortable?
which is what we'll do.
Yeah, the policy said the police chief should sign off on it too?
As I just mentioned, I spoke with the police chief, and he.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's
I was
okay.
having a
Yes,
sidebar down here,
yeah, I
so-
checked with Mike.
Okay.
Okay, and before you move to the vote, the highway surveyor sent me an email saying that he supports it.
I saw that.
And I put a little note, he called me afterwards and we had a discussion. He feels as though there should also be a light at Progress Way, which is what I had on the last agenda. Because I had received a call from someone on Progress Way saying that he wants a street, can we get a street light there? And I said, I'll check into it. And then like the following week, I get a letter, was from somebody down the other end of the street, which I didn't realize. You just
Those
I
streets
just
are right
assumed.
next to each other.
Because those streets, I think they loop together.
They do.
And the highway surveyor highly recommended that
So
we put
do
one
we-
at each one of those
So do we
entrances.
wrap that up and just get both lights taken care of?
We could do that.
I'm fine with that. I'm slightly irritated because those are relatively new developments, and I feel like, doesn't the developer have some kind of responsibility here?
Well, these streets, these lights though are going to
They'd
be
be
on Main.
on Main Street.
Literally,
Yeah.
across
On
the
that,
street
Okay.
from.
You brought that up the last time, and I don't
Street.
disagree, but the
need
question
two-
is, it's our
Do you need
street.
two motions?
No, you can do
Okay.
one motion
All right.
to
I
do
move
both
that
streets.
we approve the installation of a street light at Main and Brookside,
And
and at Progress Way.
Main and Progress
at Main
Way.
and Progress Way.
Can we ask that they're gonna be LEDs?
Yes, and, right, LED streetlights.
Motion's made, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, okay, you got the LEDs. Did you want to add something, chief?
No, you guys are going right along with what I was gonna say,
Oh, okay,
Oh.
good. And I reached out to highway surveyor, and I got the policy after it said police chief, so,
Yeah,
Yeah.
just anytime there's an intersection or a back curve, you should really consider one.
Okay.
And you're right, if somebody's developed, in the future, when if I remember correctly, that one started developing and ended for some reason, then was bought out.
yes.
In the future, if they're coming in, it doesn't hurt to ask them.
To ask something.
Yeah, if they're gonna be, their new cul-de-sacs gonna come off the main road, it doesn't really hurt to ask them at the planning level or something to do that.
Yeah, okay, good, excellent. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay, so we tabled that. Okay, correction, a waiver of fees for the library trivia night.
Yes, last agenda, I actually had on there July 13th, not 31st. So that was brought to my attention, and we need to just vote it. I have the paperwork
You
ready.
made a mistake, Mary?
I did.
I move that we approve the fee, is it a waiver or a reduction?
Waiver of-
Yeah,
Waiver
waiver
of
of
fees
fees,
for
item
the
E.
Library Foundation for the 31st.
Second. Good, motions are made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. All right, next up, JJ's Pub, 16 Liberty Street. Vote to authorize town council to file a dismissal stipulation. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, as I kind of insinuated at the last meeting, in order for this transaction of property to the new, or the intended owner, the current stipulation, the current order of conditions, as it were, that the Board of Selectmen voted over the current owner is an impingement in terms of the new owner buying it with clear title. So I had a conversation with Kate, with town council, and she spoke with that particular individual's attorney. And so what Kate has suggested is that the board vote to authorize her to do that, to do such, to dismiss the stipulation. However, that being said, the attorney acting for the buyer will hold that, in a sense, in escrow and not give that release to the current owner until she executes the P&S and the sale basically is going through. So what you would be doing is authorizing Kate to have that, to give this particular attorney that option to clear up that title and hopefully let this go forward. The current closing date has slipped to the 28th of next month. However, this other attorney believes that that passage, the transaction of the property could come to light sooner than that with this particular thing in hand.
So what kind of guarantee are we gonna get from the next owner that he's gonna clean that up?
You don't. I'm not going to lie to you. You don't. Every indication
So
I
I'm not
had.
sure what the purpose, what would be the benefit for us to waive that at closing?
You won't have a closing. He needs to have, my understanding, again, speaking to our counsel, is without that, the title is not cleared and there will be no sale to this new owner. If this new owner does not comply, and you would have to do this anyway because the particular stipulation goes with the current owner. If, let's say, none of this existed, and you had a problem with this new owner, you'd have to go through the whole process again because it goes with the individual. The order was against the individual.
All right, so we don't lose anything.
You don't lose anything at this point. You don't.
But, and I'll say it out loud, and hopefully the new owner of this property is watching it, there will be no leniency.
I mean, this is really.
Yep, they'll have the 45 days to clean up the property,
Yep.
and that's it.
It's just
It's not like we did
Yeah.
with the owner that's there now.
Yep.
So
Oh, yeah.
I hope you're watching, because you got 45 days after you buy the property.
Well,
Welcome
you
to
know, I've
Hanson.
made
Yep.
You've got 45
I've made it
days.
clear to him that if he does not comply, he will be before this board. I
like
think
right away.
I think that.
Yeah,
Like, once he takes ownership, like, we should
Yep.
give him.
we
Well,
sign the
10
papers.
days.
Well,
and
why
we
don't,
file
why
the
don't,
same.
why don't you make that motion then?
We'll get Kate
Why don't
in
you,
here.
why don't you make that motion?
Okay.
Why don't you make that
I
motion?
move that we authorize Kate to go to court and remove the stipulation for, the requirements on the current property owner at 16 Liberty Street, and that immediately upon the closing, that we file a motion for the new owner to have those same stipulations placed upon
Start
the
the process
property.
over again on the new owner.
Yep.
Okay.
'Cause there's no
Immediately.
guarantee
Yep.
that he's gonna do it. Obviously, the guy, if he's gonna invest money, he needs to clean up the
Yep.
place, but still.
So,
And then it be within 45 days.
I'll second that.
Yep, motion's been made and seconded. Anybody want to add anything to that? All right, all those in favor? 5-0. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. And then that puts his feet to the fire too.
Yep.
All right, next we have discuss and vote the Green Communities Grant item.
As I had asked at the last meeting, and you voted to authorize me to request the street lighting audit against the 150,000 some odd dollars that we've got in Green Community Grant money. I need to get the board's authorization to proceed with other items. And in discussions with the town planner and others, my concern was that we had a hard and fast deadline of the 8th of February. We've come to find out, push comes to shove, that we've got a little more play in that. They want it in by the 8th of February, but they're willing to wait. I don't really want to wait. We are still working on the final figures as to how we would submit the request for these things that I'm going to mention to you right now. But I'm comfortable with asking the board if they would allow me to proceed in conjunction with OCPC and our town planner to also include in our request the money for replacement of the furnace at the library, replacement of the police station furnace, insulation of the attic here at Town Hall, and any additional monies that we have to do replacement lighting in the various facilities throughout the town. So, that being said, if for some reason there is the necessity to get even more defined, I've got enough time to do that. Like I said, we want to do it by the 8th, they want it done by the 8th. I think that by voting this, you allow me to proceed with that and get all that in line. However, if for some reason something else comes up, which I do not anticipate, we do have a little bit more time, but I don't want to wait.
So moved.
Mike's, wait, Mike's waving over there.
You just changed police furnace to police hot water.
Police hot water.
I know, I kept calling them boilers.
Yeah, I wanted to talk
Big
about
metal
it.
thing, hot water in them, I don't know what they do.
Police
But
hot
they're
water.
actually hot water heaters.
Okay.
The boilers are fine.
As amended.
Well, Matt wanted to talk about it.
So, being on the Green Committee, we haven't discussed insulation in the attic or, I mean, we've made the motion to approve a energy reduction plan, and that was mentioned in there. But as a committee, we haven't discussed that. So we're meeting next Wednesday, and it might be cutting it close or past due.
What day is Wednesday? What
The
day is it?
6th.
The
Six.
sixth.
Why don't you make the motion contingent upon the support of that particular committee? I would anticipate we'll get
Is it a
it.
matter of support, or shouldn't they be the ones deciding what the priorities are? I mean,
It's
is it
the-
possible you would come up with different priorities? I don't know.
So how it works on the Green Community is the committee will make these recommendations, but it's ultimately Board of Selectmen that will approve.
But did you make those recommendations that Mike is?
So we approved the energy reduction plan, which covers a lot of this, and a couple of them, like the hot water furnace, the hot water tank at the police station, and the library, kind of popped up, and we quickly mentioned it, and those aren't going to be included in the energy reduction plan. But that's something that I know for a fact that we'd be more than happy to support, because we did discuss it.
I just don't want to step on your feet and have us taking a even though I know ultimately we're the ones who are going to decide. We obviously want to support the committee that we've empowered to make make
Well,
those
the process
recommendations.
is, and it really depends on how each town wishes to go through the process, but as I think Matt touched upon, and you may have touched upon, it really is the Board of Selectmen decision. And, to go through that particular process with the Energy Commission, not that I disagree with it, but it's not necessary in terms of what the state's looking for. And again, my biggest concern in all of this is meeting certain deadlines. And, I've had conversations with Matt, not in particular with one or two of these specifics, but it is really all encompassing in terms of what the grant is for. And we've had things pop up. And I think you've been to the police station. I'm not sure if you,
No, we haven't
you
been
went
to the library yet.
But Chris Collins included that in his energy assessment. So he's done whatever he needed to do, because that also is necessary in terms of getting this forward in front of, to get a positive approval from the state on this. So if the board is so inclined to wait until, I don't anticipate there being any issues,
I
but
think we could do a contingent, Matt. Do you
that's,
think-
no,
I
that's,
feel comfortable
and that's what I
with that.
said, I'm fine with that as well. I guess my point is I didn't want to have to come before I wouldn't have the opportunity to come before the board, before the 8th passes, even though, like I said, technically I could push it, I don't want to anymore. I just want to get this over and done with and moving forward, so.
Okay, so moved contingent upon the Energy Committee supporting those.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor? 5-0. Okay, next we have reviewed the cell tower. So Mike, I have a quick question on this. So the school, because it's on school grounds, they're the lessor on here along with the town of Hanson. They're not gonna be getting the money though.
No,
The money's coming to the.
yeah, it's,
We own the schools too, so,
as,
yeah.
as we have said from the beginning, we've had a gentleman's agreement, as it were, to make sure that the school committee, since they do lease, rent the property from us, and they've certainly been all but supportive, that, again, as a courtesy, to have them sign off as well, and I don't anticipate that being an issue. When the board signs off on this, I'm going to ask the school committee to put it on that meeting on the 6th, I believe it is, when they're doing their budget or their budget recommendations.
But to Kenny's point, you've got a gentleman's agreement, but where am I seeing it in black and white, that that's how that deal's gonna go down?
Well, say it again.
That the town's getting the money.
That's the way the town voted. That's the way we put it out. This is not going to the school committee. This is going to the general fund.
So that's in a separate
This is
agreement
going to the general
with the
fund.
cell company, that
Yes.
we're the ones that get paid?
Yes.
And this is just the lease?
Yes.
Has general counsel reviewed this?
Oh, yes, up until about 3 hours ago.
They didn't have any
This-
question on the limits of the workers' comp, right?
Nope, no. This, we went back and forth with this, between the two attorneys.
Okay.
I don't even want to venture to guess how many times. But the final okay from our attorney came at some point today, that she is comfortable with what you have in front of her. That's actually, I don't think you've met her, Sarah, who works for Jay's firm. She's generally the contracts person.
Can I ask the million-dollar question? Well, when will our cell service be better?
When it goes up,
Okay, what's our ETA on that?
probably late spring, early summer. I don't think they're very difficult to put up. It's a
This year?
It's a pad, yes, it's a pad and a pole. And
Okay,
it's
And how long, it might be easier if you tell me than me trying to find it. How long is this lease good for?
The 20,
Good for 20 years?
Yep.
Okay.
with some kickers, with some extensions.
Okay.
yeah.
And just, my question is always, any monies that we would earn from this automatically goes to the general fund?
Yes, yes. It is, this is not earmarked to go to the schools. In the end of the day, maybe the money goes to a town meeting vote to the schools, but it's going into the general fund as unanticipated revenues.
Okay.
And my question would be, at the end of this, what happens to the pole and the site?
They remove it.
They'll remove
It's
it?
their responsibility.
Okay.
Well, you're hoping to sign another 20 years.
Well, I just wanted to make sure.
You might be the only one here that's worried about
Well,
that.
hey,
That's a bleak outlook.
well, no, with 5G coming along, they're putting the mini towers on the telephone poles. They're not
Oh,
doing
right.
these big
Yeah,
towers.
so you're right, it'll be
anymore.
obsolete in 20 years.
That's their
Right.
Well,
responsibility
we
to.
probably won't even have cell phones.
Again,
There'll be some
that's
other
your
method of
responsibility.
communicating.
I
It's
do
right
like
here.
this, I like this 2%. On the annual rate goes up 2% every year.
Yeah,
I like
it
that.
escalates, and as I may have indicated, we also get a percentage of the rent for all the other carriers. And one of the things I was happy to find out is they pretty much have secured at least one second carrier. So I think we estimated they'd probably get 2 to 3. And again, that once the poll gets up or it's closer to actual fruition, is when you'll probably see more people sign on with them, and we'll see, the resultant money. But they had indicated to me that they're pretty positive. They have lined up yet another one, so.
So are we voting to authorize you to sign this? or-
No, you're signing it.
Okay.
So moved.
And there's two documents to sign.
Motion's been made, and a second.
Somebody did second it, I thought.
I think he made it and seconded it.
I did so. I thought so too, I'm like,
And I'll vote.
Usually I can't get him to say anything. Now, tonight, he's
I will
he's
second it.
vocal. Motion's made and seconded. Any more questions? All right, good job with this cell phone thing, Mike.
Yes.
But I'm not gonna give you that, boy, until I see the tower up and my phone works.
Oh,
All
Oh,
those in favor?
it's painful, Kenny.
5-0.
Hurtful.
All right. Town administrators report.
Well, we
Fred, Mike.
covered an awful lot of things. I don't really have an awful lot in terms of what's happened between the last meeting and this meeting, and as I furiously look for my notes, which of course it's different right here. Just a few real quick things. I met with Representative Cutler yesterday morning. He has asked whether or not, first off the top of my head, and I wanted to bring it to the Board of Selectmen, if there are any earmarks, any sort of outside legislation funding that the board might be interested in him going after. You're well aware, because we talked about it recently, and we had $30,000 for economic development efforts, and we've signed a contract for somebody to do a master plan and look at that. And we've got $15,000 for improvements to historical sites and other things in support of the 200th anniversary. About a year or so ago, we got approximately $20,000 to $30,000 to do some testing out on the pond in terms of the pollution out there. So he really can't do too much, but he has asked whether or not the board, and I don't expect anything tonight, whether or not the board has any thoughts. You can get those back to me. Again, we're not talking anything of great substance, but if there's $20,000, $30,000 sort of items that you'd like me to try to, and I don't think that necessitates a vote of the board. You can just send them to me and I'll send them along, because we generally give him kind of a laundry list, and he and his staff and probably people, beyond that, take a look at what possibly they can do. So just keep it in mind and let me know.
I'm sorry,
That's
Mike.
okay, no.
And could it be a combination of things? Like, maybe something cost $8,000 to do, and then something else might cost 15. Could it be a couple of things?
Well, if they were related, we'd lump them together, but I don't think if you've got an $8,000 item, let's say for the camp, and you've got a $10,000 item, say, there's another pond we wanted to take a look at, I'd send those separate.
Okay.
I wouldn't, unless, again, let's say it was improvements to the cabins up at the camp, and it was, let's say, McQuon. We could probably bundle that together, or ask them to bundle together as overall improvements to the camp area.
Okay.
But there should be some nexus between, if we're gonna try to put them together.
Well, I was just thinking, just off the top of my head, like maybe helping Tim White and the veteran, and maybe like just painting all the poles or putting up new signs.
Well, in all honesty, Jim, that could be something we apply the 15 grand we have right now to.
Okay.
Because that certainly could be something you would say sprucing the town up for the 200th anniversary. I was trying to think if it made sense to ask for another 15, but the 200th will be there by then. But that's a good line of thinking. But I think
Okay.
I think if we wanted to, I have the money to apply to that right now.
All right.
And they may say something like that too. Well, we kind of already gave you money for that. Pick something else. So
Okay.
just
I'll come up with something.
okay.
Okay.
Let me know.
Sorry.
No, it's great.
Um, Yeah, I wanted to let the board know that on the 23rd of January, I met with the town planner and with environmental partners just to finalize, to kind of give the last blessing to going forward with the Complete Streets project up at the corner. What we're going to do, we're going to supplement the money that the state is giving us with some Chapter 90 money, because at the end of the day, what we had planned out, and we did scale it back a bit, but we had planned out exceeded what the state gave us, so it's perfectly legal and applicable, or it's legal to apply Chapter 90 money on that because it's street improvements. So that's going to go out, I believe, probably within the next week or so. That'll start going through the process of going out to bid and being posted. And that actually is going to be handled, it's encompassed within the agreement that we had made with environmental partners. They're going to be handling all of that. So at the end of the day, what I envision is coming before the Board of Selectmen with what they would probably advance as a suggestion, and then my suggestion, and of course the Board of Selectmen would make the final vote to bring in a contractor and subs and things of that nature. So that's moving forward. In addition to that, I anticipate within the next couple of weeks or so, going in with environmental partners to it's Mass DOT now, I still call it Mass Highway, in Taunton, to go through the next step in terms of the Route 14 McQuon Street TIP program, not to be confused with the TIP program. We continue to move forward to the 25% engineering design, which at that point will advance us further, and it's kind of confusing. In the ranking in the TIP process with OCPC, it's basically making sure that we keep up with the timeline that we've put together. As they get closer to 25%, they're in the roads, they're making slight changes here and there. That needs to be okayed by Mass Highway each step of the way. So I guess the point being, we continue to move forward with that, I think in a positive direction. We're not to the 25% yet, but we should be fairly soon. And probably at some point, probably in the next couple of months or so, I'll have the actual engineers come in and give you an update. You voted a lot of the outstanding questions at a previous meeting, and of course they're going forward with all of that. But again, I wanted to make sure the board was aware that those two things, where they were and how they were advancing forward. I mentioned the cell tower. Just as an aside, You may have seen, we put together another cable show in which I brought in the chairman of the Board of Health. Again, he's just raising an eyebrow, you just threw me off.
Sorry, Mike.
Again, trying to advance the board's request of transparency and outreach and things of that nature. And the next show that I have lined up is with the chairman of the planning board, and we'll continue on like that. Additionally, and I don't think I have said this yet before, but I'd invite any member of the Board of Selectmen if they have a topic they'd like to come and talk. It's you've seen the show. It's fairly laid back. It's not scripted. It's really just we put together a couple of talking items, and the next thing you know, half an hour is gone. So, and if Carol's still here, she's in the back, usually giving me the numbers to cut it, to cut off my my palaver. So, and we mentioned that the schools are going to meet on the 6th to deliver at least their first cut at the budget.
And I've posted that in the event we have more than 2 people going.
Good idea.
I forwarded to the Board of Selectmen today, and I'm not looking for action on it today. I spoke with the senior Senate director in regards to a proposal, a more formal proposal of the consultant we have coming in and taking a look at the future of the Council on Aging or the Senior Center. Again, similar to what the library is doing. Of course, this is obviously much further, or much more nascent in the sense. But what I would like to do is, I'd like to get the Board of Selectmen's approval to sign a contract pursuant to that proposal, which I'll ask at the next meeting. But I wanted you to see the proposal. And it's, Mary's very comfortable with it. She's very happy with it. But just to keep in line with what I think the board wants as far as procedure, I'll ask you for a formal vote, but I'm not prepared to right now.
I just want to say that Joanne and I are stunned, and literally stunned, that 4,300 people in the town of Hanson are over 50.
Well, I mean, Stonebridge Commons and all the.
That's fine. I can say even Perry Ave, but I'm still going. And a town slightly over 10,000, 40% of the people in Hanson are over 50 years old. That is a stunning.
You trying to say there's gonna be a lot of funerals in 30 years?
You got 3 out of 5 on the board.
It impact,
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to bring that up for the town.
3 out of 5, please.
And the only thing that I will conclude
Thanks, Jim. I
with,
appreciate the compliment.
I'll conclude with, Mr. Chairman, after the Board of Selectmen voted to hire the interim conservation agent at its last meeting, it was brought to my attention that technically it really should have been the Conservation Commission with my recommendation making that appointment. So I got the Conservation Commission to meet on Friday. They voted for nothing to go forward with that. So we've addressed that that lapse.
And you don't believe that we need to rescind our vote?
No, I do not. No.
Is that it?
That's all I have.
Okay, excellent. Committee reports, and then we'll do Mike's evaluation. 20th Anniversary Committee.
We're meeting this Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Final Plymouth County Hospital Reuse Committee.
Still waiting on the date to meet.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
I can speak to that for 1 second if you want. I am going to meet, I believe, next week with the new consultant, and there had been, I think, some concerns on the part of that committee as to the message and the direction that particular consultant had gotten. So I'm going to meet with him to, clarify some things based on my knowledge of what I think the commission, matter of fact, what I know the commission wants or the committee wants. Okay. So what I would anticipate is after I have that conversation with him next week, there'll be a follow-up meeting, probably with him, put together. So, but I want to make sure that, everyone's on the same sheet of music, and I'm not necessarily sure that's the case right this minute, but
All right.
I'm confident I can take care of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. McQuon School Reuse Committee.
What's our next meeting?
The 13th of February, we will be reviewing the RFPs that we anticipate getting in for brokerage services.
And Highway Building Committee, we haven't met, so nothing to report there. Okay, so last thing on the agenda, we have Mike's review. Mary, you want to pass out the compile? So We all turned in individual reviews of Mike, which we can't look at each other's, or we haven't looked at each other's individual reviews. So on this compiled review that's about to come down, it's gonna have comments on it. I don't wanna get into reading the comments on here. And certainly if you see a comment that you made, don't tell us you made that comment, because then
Matt, just take one and pass it to
we
me.
know what your evaluation of Mike is, so.
So
just be mindful of that.
can we just walk through like what the protocol is here?
Okay,
So you're gonna pass this out?
Mary's gonna do that right now.
Okay.
So, I typed up a cheat sheet, but I think I left it on my printer. What I did is I had taken everyone, Tracy, if you want to use, taken everyone's comments, put them in the compilation. They unidentified and who says what. When you read it, you'll know whether it's yours or not. Some people were more detailed than others. Not everybody commented on every one of the 10 categories. And after I did that, everyone scored in each category. What you have on the back page is what the scores, the total scores were for each category, and a high and a low from each category. So you have the total of what the evaluation was, and then an overall score, which would be divided by 5 members. So if, the board has comments, some of the comments were similar for each one of the categories. Others were a bit different, but at least 3 out of the 5 people who did this said that they don't like the evaluation tool. Pretty much said that it needs work. And I just want to explain that this tool was created several years ago by a previous selectman, and it's been tweaked over the years with things added to it and changing. It doesn't mean that this has to be the official tool going forward. If the board isn't comfortable with the tool, the next process, we can come up with something different with, agreement with the town administrator on
It's just
how it wants to.
redundant, like, sometimes
It's-
the
it
questions
was-
are like.
It came from the
you feel like,
federal
didn't I
government,
just answer that
is
question?
all I have to say.
Oh,
So
well,
that's
When
what
is the next time that Mike will be reviewed or
be
evaluated?
next year, we'll do the
Once
process,
a
we're back
year.
on
We
the
can
calendar.
still go
once a
back
year.
12 months.
Basically next November, December.
Yeah, actually, January for 19.
Right, so the evaluation tool will go out in December, it will come back in January, and we'll be doing in January, just to kind of get on a cycle. We've never really, I hate to say this, never really had anybody here long enough to get it really rolling. It's always been changing, somebody's coming in new, so it's been difficult to get on a real path. But if we can ever decide what they want to have for a tool, and someone mentioned it would be good if we had the goals so we can compare them to what the evaluation is. I apologize, I probably should have included that in the when the evaluation tool went out, to give you something to look at. But we've talked about it, and I think this whole board was together when we went over
Yeah.
the goals that we wanted.
And it's not fair to
see.
evaluate him when somebody wasn't here.
No, correct. So I'm pretty sure we did the goals after.
Yeah, we did.
Wes and Matt came on.
Yes.
Right, we sat down, came up with a list of things. I should have sent them along so you could have something to compare it to. But,
Well, just as an educator, I mean, I honestly feel that any evaluation should be a goal, a
Driven.
goal-driven evaluation, which this was not in any way.
No.
I mean, that's why I definitely protested this evaluation. But that just tells me that then, very shortly, we as a board should be meeting to discuss what Mike's goals are for the following year. And then I'm just one vote, but I would want to see an entirely different tool that was a list of goals, and then we judged him on how well
I
he
agree.
performed on those goals in the coming year.
100%.
Yeah, I like that.
Matt had something.
Yes, good.
Matt
That's
does.
Oh, I'm sorry. go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so it's just kind of echo what Mr. Bloss just was saying, was I believe that we, maybe, seeing how we just got this tonight, maybe take it home and review it, and then just come back next week with a list of, some ideas of goals, so we can start evaluating him, not only in a year, but maybe in a few short months to say, all right, let's work on, X, Y, Z. Because, because we could sit here and awkward silence and read through it and then come back with some ideas.
But
But
it's a lot to digest.
it is a lot to digest,
Yeah.
and I think that it might be best to kind of come back next meeting with some goals.
I like that idea, and I agree. I mean, in the private sector, you would never just sort of hand people like a, like language and without saying, here's what you do well, here's some things you need to work on, and here's how we're gonna measure your progress on working towards those goals. And I'd like to see, not, at the risk of potentially making this a much more painful process for you, Mike, I would actually almost like to see us check in quarterly, and maybe not so much of a forum, but to Wes's point and Matt's point, have like, okay, Mike needs to work on these projects, on these competencies, improving these competencies, and here's how we're going to know he's improved that competency. He will have done this, and, that just a check-in, like little tune-up, a little check-in, so that you're not waiting a whole year to figure out that, hey, you know what, for the whole year, we didn't think you did very well addressing those concerns.
To work on it before.
Yeah.
That's true, too.
Yeah.
And as an
All good
educator,
I'm comfortable with
we
that.
generated really most of our goals. I generated my goals with my administrator.
Okay.
And while, the administrator certainly had input and was able to say yes or no, I was the generator of the goals, which I also think that Mike is part of this process.
That's I like where you're going with that, so could Mike take a look at this?
Yeah.
And come up with, from what you're reading, once you've got time to digest it, because this is the first you're seeing, you're seeing it too. Could you read through and say, here's some things that I'm seeing, and here's what I propose to do to effectuate change?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
And I was gonna go a step further and say, maybe even Wes work with him on that, and then we can all come back and talk about the goals.
Would you feel comfortable doing that?
If Mike would feel comfortable, I'm
know.
fine with that.
Comfortable dealing
We
with
want to turn it
questions
to a
from any
positive,
member.
There's
Yeah, I
obviously,
just
there's a
wanted-
couple of things that we're all concerned about, but we want this to be a positive process,
Just to be clear,
you know?
we all have things we need to work on.
Right. She
It's
means us
just our
personally.
job to tell you what you're,
Right.
because that's the way that this is set up. But, it's really just a personal growth thing, it's just here's some things that, you could work on. We all have things we could work on. And, yeah, I like the idea if Wes is willing to work on it. And, instead of just
And
dwelling
if
in the
Mike is willing, I
negatives.
think that's the way, to do that.
I'm fine with
Because
that.
he was already willing to change, because I think in his contract, we were supposed to do the review at the end of May. And then Mike agreed, I think Jim brought it up a couple times that, hey, when I first got on, it's not fair to evaluate the town administrator 2 weeks after I
Right.
just got sworn in. So Mike changed that, agreed to that change at the end of the year.
Well, at the end of the day, the five of you, in a group, I report to you, and I certainly want to make sure that, as I go on, hopefully for a while in this position, that I'm doing what this board, I'm accomplishing what this board wishes to be accomplished, whether that's, a finite accomplishment or that's the way of carrying, the way I do business. So, I've never been one to shy away from constructive criticism, and I'll take that, everything, and I haven't read it yet, obviously, but I'll take all that, with that in mind, and if the board is so inclined, and I'm very comfortable, speaking with Selectman Bloss about any of these things.
I
we
like
can have a
what
conversation.
Bloss said and Matt,
Yeah.
take a little bit and then we'll put together and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. I'd rather go that route than,
So you want us
You
to
know.
take away Kenny and each of us kind of, if there's something we specifically think, but in the interim, Wes could maybe meet with Mike and
Yeah.
come up with something we could respond to, and maybe we might have something we add, or,
Right.
okay.
yep.
And I know
And-
as always, and I've had conversations with maybe every member of this board, at some point, and not into the too distant past. I'm always happy to sit down and have a discussion if there's a concern about a particular item or the way something is being conducted, to have that conversation.
Mary, you want to add to that?
I just wanted to say that any one of the selectmen can go in and talk to Mike about the evaluation. He'll get your evaluations separately. so we can see what they are, and you can go in and talk to them, what they are.
Yeah, and you know what? I encourage that. I think everybody should. Everybody should, and then when we come back, and then that'll help you have a better understanding, you know? So, does that sound good?
I'm perfectly fine with that.
Excellent. Okay. Anybody else have anything else they want to add? If not, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So,
We don't need a motion to approach this the way that we just described, right?
No.
No, I don't believe so.
No, I think that's a general consensus.
We had general
All right,
consensus.
so, second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Hickey and seconded by Mrs.
Kenny,
Kennedy.
before we
Yes.
make a movement to
Yes.
adjourn, just thank you, both of you, for keeping our office up and running, and thank you for coming in.
Matt always has to
and, yeah, and thank you for letting us pay you. Thank you tonight to everyone.
Hey, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
5-0. Thank you, folks, for watching. Good night.